back, listeners, to the Mindful Living podcast. I'm your host, Sana, and let me ask you this: what does it mean to truly live when the shadow of death is always near? Today, we journey through grief, love, and a father's unwavering devotion. Our guest, Bob Furniss, spent decades as a leader in the customer service world, an award winning consultant with a lifetime of professional success. But when his daughter, Keesha, was diagnosed with stage 4 breast cancer at just 30, everything changed. And in this powerful new memoir, On to Blue, Bob shares stories of resilience, lessons learned from his daughter's extraordinary strength, and how the hardest, the most difficult, the toughest moments of his life became his greatest teachers. We'll talk about what it means to love someone through terminal illness, the surprising gifts of neurodivergence, and why early detection in young women can't be an afterthought. And listeners, trust me, this is not just a story of loss, it's a story of transformation, purpose, strength, and the kind of love that finds a new way forward. With that, Bob, welcome to the Mindful Living, and I am really, really honored to have you here with us.
Good morning, Sana. I'm very happy to be here. I need you to be my marketing person because that was beautiful. Thank you.
I mean, the words, your journey, and as I'm also in my 30s, and my father, it just reminded of the unconditional love my father has for me and I have for him. So it's going to be really, really an emotional one for me. But yeah, let's begin, Bob. uh, your book, it captures so many deeply personal moments with Keisha. So what compelled you to write from a father's perspective? And how did writing help you process the grief? I mean, because sometimes going back or revisiting those moments, that journey, it can sometimes really open the floodgates and, get us into a very um, confusing or difficult position or state of mind. So, what exactly was in there that compelled you to share the story?
Well, I love writing. I've written in the industry, the customer service industry, as you mentioned, for my entire career, and so I love writing. I had a friend of mine say, after I told him a couple of stories about Keisha, that was my daughter's name, Keisha, and he said, "You should write a book." And I said, "Well, I've been thinking about it." He goes, "No, you should write a book." And so I sat down to write a book to talk about what it was, what she taught me about life, because I've always come at things through the lens of business. Like, there was always five things to do at the end of the article, or five things you should learn at the end of the article. And so I wrote it from a perspective of what did she teach me? How did what did I learn that I can take with me and perhaps help others with? So that was the catalyst for the book. Um, and the story about how I decided to write the book was actually around, I wrote an article. So Keisha was diagnosed in 2013 and cancer took her life in 2017. And in 2018, I wrote an article to the Commercial Appeal, which is the local newspaper in Memphis. And the name of the article was "The Question That Every Dad Should Ask His Daughter." And I was asking my daughter the questions of, are you being careful when you're out by yourself? Are you being careful when you open the door? Are you being careful in parking lots? Like, I ask her, do you have gas in the car? I ask her all of the dad questions. But the one question I didn't ask her was, are you doing self checks on a monthly basis? And are you going to the gynecologist or to your healthcare provider and talking to them about your breast health? And those were questions that I know now that if I had asked her and if she had done, then perhaps she would still be here. Now, I don't take responsibility for her death, but I do. When I wrote the article, it was to get fathers to ask their daughters that question, and for men to ask their wives that question, for people to ask women in their life, for mothers to ask daughters, are you doing those two things? Because we know that breast cancer has a very high survivor rate. If you find it in stage one or even in stage two, it has a high survival rate. It's when it moves into stage three or four in other parts of the body that the the survival rate becomes so low. So I wrote that article and it went viral, and it's still active today on the website. It's on our website at warriorprincess.org, but you can read the whole article. But that was the catalyst. And from that, just became starting a nonprofit. In her name, we have the nonprofit Keesha Warrior Princess, and then the Cheers story. I mean, the commercial appeal became the catalyst for for moving forward with the book.
That is so poignant. That is so beautiful. Um, um, I know it can be tough, but every one of us would love to know, Keisha, how was she in her childhood? And I also believe that, because you have shared how Keisha's ADD, once seen as a challenge, how it became her superpower in the later days of her life. So, if you can share, I know time is a constraint, but if you can, I mean, we would love.
Yeah, I'll talk fast. I have a lot of stories. I think I realized you asked me why did I write the book, and how tough was it. I realized that it was harder to take stories out of the book than it was to leave stories in, because there's so many stories, and it was such a time of therapeutics to write the book, because there were days when I would write a story and I would cry, and it would bring back emotions, and then there were days I wrote stories about fun, light concepts of who she was. So when she was a child, she had ADD, not ADHD. She wasn't hyper. She was just very centered of being able to do one thing at a time. If I went into her room and said, "Okay, we gotta go to school. You gotta put on your shoes and your socks and get your books and put them in your bag and meet me in the car in 5 minutes." I just gave her 3 too many things to do, because she was only good at one at a time. Now, I could go in and say one at a time, and she would do them well. In fact, she was in the marching band in high school and in college, and I was convinced that she was she didn't have the ability. Yeah, I was worried that she didn't have the ability to march and play at the same time. And she told us after she got out of college that when she was in the marching band, she goes, "I have ADD. I didn't play when I was marching. I only played when I was standing still. I just moved my fingers." So that was an example of her learning to adapt to her limitations, right? Like,
Yeah.
I think sometimes we take our limitations in life and we hold on to them, and we let them limit the things we can do, instead of adapting the things that we want to do to fit our limitations. So there she was on the field with 150 other students in the marching band, and she's learned that, well, when I'm marching, I got to think about marching, and when I'm playing, I can stand still and play. But let me tell you how it became her superpower. So when she was diagnosed with stage 4, which is, we used to call that terminal cancer. We all knew that it would take a a true miracle for her to survive the cancer at stage 4, but it became her superpower, Sana, because she focused on living another day, on living another week, on living another month, and that was her focus. When she would talk to the doctor, he would put her on, she was on 14 different chemo regimens, and he would put her on a new regimen. And at the end of the conversation, she always asked the question, so if this doesn't work, what's next? So her focus was to live. And we didn't spend a lot of time talking about how she got there or what she missed, although she did miss some signs that she shouldn't have missed. And as I said, I should have been asking tougher questions. But her superpower was, I'm gonna live another day, I'm gonna live another week, and that's where my focus is gonna be. And I believe that's why she lived for 4 years, even though the doctors had not originally given her that much time to live.
Mm, indeed, indeed. She is a warrior princess, and she asked you. I mean, she's told you to keep sharing her story because through her story, through her journey, she wanted other people to realize that what were the mistakes made and they shouldn't commit those mistakes. So with that, your nonprofit Warrior Princess, it focuses on early detection for women under 45, a group which is often excluded from regular screenings, because it's kind of assumed that 30s, 20s, or even 40s, they are way too early to kind of have those signs even considered. What is the biggest misconception people, and I'm just not talking about women, men, they have about young women and breast cancer, Bob?
I think I think the biggest misconception is what you just talked about, Sana. It is that breast cancer can't happen. 11% of I'm not sure what it is in India, but 11% of women in the United States are diagnosed before 45. What's what's also pretty significant there is 85% of cancer is found first by the woman. So if you think about that for a moment, so you find either other symptoms or you're doing breast self checks and you
Mhm.
find a lump in your breast. So I- the the importance is to find things early and to talk about them with your doctor or your medical professional, because if you find it early, you have a much higher rate of survival than if you find it late, like my daughter did. Um, and one other thing that fit, I she had some journals, and I asked her before she died, was it okay if I went through her journals when when was it okay if I went through her journals when I was doing my writing at some point about her life? And she said, "Sure, I don't have anything to hide. Just don't pay any attention to to the part where I talk about my boyfriends." So, uh, she so in her journal, she quoted in big letters, she quoted from the movie Dory,
Yeah.
from Finding Nemo, just keep swimming, just keep swimming." And that was the way she looked at life, was just keep swimming, and her disabilities didn't hold her down. In the book, I have, uh, at the end of every section, I have what are called Keisha-isms, and that's obviously a word that I made up, but they're little tidbits of things that I learned from her or that she talked about, and the one of them was focus on what you can change and not on what you have no control over. That was that was something that she did. Um, the so there are Keisha-isms throughout the book, and so we sort of tell some stories. In the first part of the book, I talk about when she was young. In the second part, I talk about her diagnosis. In the third part, I talk about what it was like to live through the grief of losing a daughter. And then at the end, I tell the story for the name of the book. Uh, so the nonprofit is an extension or was around before the book, but will become an extension of the book. There's a chapter in the book about the nonprofit, and you're right, it focuses on women 25 to 45. My daughter was going to a regular doctor, and they were diagnosing her with asthma, or they were diagnosed her with, "Oh, you're a kindergarten teacher, you probably pick up kids. You must have pulled a muscle in your back." But they weren't even looking for breast cancer. So, the most important thing is to learn more about breast cancer. There's a lot of information out on the web. On our website, we have a tab called resources, and there's tons of information about how to make sure that there's even an example of how to do a breast exam in a video. So there are ways to learn about breast cancer and how to focus on it as a woman.
That is really helpful. And it definitely, I mean, feels like our health systems, they often wait until something is wrong because it's more about quick fixes or um, working on the external solutions more than addressing the root cause. And
Yeah, and sometimes you have to be your own best advocate.
yeah,
So if you find something and they dismiss it, tell them the story that I'm telling today. Tell them the story about the girl that you heard about on a podcast that was just 30 years old, and she ended up dying from cancer, from breast cancer, because they didn't find it early enough. Tell them, be your own best advocate and talk to the doctor about the importance of this.
absolutely, absolutely, absolutely. Bob, before we wrap up, some listeners, they may hear your story, Keisha's journey, and they would feel overwhelmed, like it's too heavy or too painful to carry. What would you say to someone who is in the thick of grief right now or supporting someone through illness?
So one of the things that I've heard from people who read my book, is the word that I hear the most is that it's very raw. And I
Mm.
I I think what they mean by that is I didn't back away from talking about what grief is and how grief affects you. I think sometimes when we're in the middle of something like that, people around us, they don't know what to say. So they say things like, "It'll get better."
Yeah.
Let me tell you that that happened in 2017. It didn't get better. It got a little different. I probably 7 years ago couldn't have had this podcast without crying. So it's different, but the pain and the grief of missing her, it actually happens every day. Uh, every day there's a moment in my life where I think about her for the first time that day, and all over again, I remember that she died. And so if you're overwhelmed by that grief, it's okay to have grief. It's okay. I even my wife and I talk about just living in the grief, just being okay to have a bad day, to have a day where you miss her more than you did yesterday. It's okay to have a bad day. By the way, I used to tell her that she was the kind of patient that when you said, "So, how are you today, Keisha?" She would say, "Oh, I'm okay." That meant that she was having a really bad day. If she said, "Oh, I'm good," that meant she was having a fairly okay day. If she said, "I'm great," that meant she was good. She always upsized whatever her feelings were. So you had to pay attention to it. And I think sometimes we say to people who ask us, "How are we doing?" And we don't want to share, we don't want to bring down the moment, but it's okay to tell other people, "Wow, you know what? I'm having a really, really hard day today. And it's it's a tough day, but we're gonna make it through it." She would want me to live my life, and I can make that work by letting other people help me through my tough days.
That is really, really bold and empowering. And yes, I couldn't agree more with you, Bob, because grief can be such a powerful emotion, and that's why sometimes conversations or talking and just maybe in your workplace or with your friends, your family members, or maybe just giving a phone call and asking how are you, and it doesn't take much effort. It may take up some of your time, especially who are taking care of someone, or they are the friends or family members, or maybe colleagues, or relatives also. It's okay, it's okay, it won't take much of your time, but it can work a way long to save the one with whom you're interacting, you're talking right now. So that's why it's so important to have these conversations, um, either through talking, or through podcasts, or through writing, through singing, through art. There's so many channels here to channelize our thoughts and feelings. So, Bob, thank you so so much. Um, I mean, not just sharing Keisha's story, but your story as her father, as her voice, and now as a guide for others walking a road no parents want to walk. So, thank you so
Yes, thank you
much.
so much, Sana. By the way, I think you said this, but the book is available on Amazon under on the Blue Book. On the If you search on the Blue Book and Bob Furniss, it'll come up.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. And if our listeners they would like to connect with you, Bob, what will be the best way?
Um, there is if you go to the website, there's connecting emails or connecting social media. I'm everywhere, so you can find me if you want to connect and talk, or if you want to connect and perhaps talk about uh, what we've talked about today.
Beautiful. I'll make sure to have all the links. And Bob, thank you once again.
Thank you, thank you so much.
And to all the listeners, I invite you to reflect on this conversation. How can you love someone as they wish to be loved today? So make sure to visit warriorprincess.org to learn more about Bob's nonprofit. Do check out On to Blue Memoir. I'll make sure to have all the links in the show notes. And as always, stay gentle, stay grounded, and keep choosing life one mindful moment at a time. And remember that you are not alone and your voice matters. You matter. Thank you.